Welcome back. On this video, we are going to have a Madagascar Rosewood explosion extraordinaire comparison. Everything's going to happen in this video. It's going to be amazing.
And how we're going to do it, we've got 5 different guitars, all built with Madagascar Rosewood, 5 different builders. Does the Madagascar Rosewood have a commonality across builders? Is it the wood or is it the builder?
All the difference. That's what we're going to find out. For those of you who have not experienced a guitar with Madagascar Rosewood, this has kind of become a close replacement for a Brazilian Rosewood sound.
Both in appearance and tone.
Yeah, it has a lot of the commonalities of Brazilian Rosewood, like you said, in its sound, in that it has this kind of, it's a little bit harder, so it kind of has a little more reflective, percussive type of tone, and also has a lot of those same looks in them as well. So we've been seeing that show up in a lot of guitars in the $7,000 to $13,000 range. It was kind of interesting to hear the news last year that Eastman had got a hold of him. And again, this has not come with its own share of controversy as well. We've done a lot of work with our good friend Tom Bedell at Bedell and Breedlove Guitars, and we talked about, what's wrong with Madagascar. I think everybody kind of agrees that it's a great tone wood, looks great, sounds great, but there are some issues, and we probably ought to cover a little bit of that.
And I think we talked about it briefly in another video we did on the Madagascar Rosewood. And the problem isn't necessarily with legality of the Rosewood. It's just that it's harder to confirm with some of the mills that are there. So because of that, we're not 100% confident, even though they've got all the right paperwork to show that this was legally harvested and all that. It's very difficult in that environment to make sure that this exact piece of wood didn't get slipped into the pile of other legally harvested wood. So it's something that Tom has mentioned that they are working on in Madagascar. He's not comfortable yet until they really got that ironed out that he's going to use it with Bedell and Breedlove instruments. Eastman, the mill that the wood supplier they use is very reputable. Has all the papers to confirm it, but again, because Tom pointed out some of those backstories that sometimes a log gets slipped down into the pile or rolled down the hill in the night and then kind of added to that supply, it makes it a little less easy to confirm papers from cut down.
I do believe that every
mill.
one of these manufacturers that we have here today has done their due diligence in order to make sure they have the most reputable version of Madagascar available right now.
I think,
and
the good news is that I think because people that are starting to pay attention to this are starting to ask for sustainability and ethical harvesting of wood, that the actual wood suppliers are now answering that call and making sure that they are following to the letter of the law and making sure, because it's the same thing. We don't want the same thing to happen with Brazilian, where it just completely gets banned because there just was no oversight, there was no control over it. So I think they're being very conscientious about Madagascar Rosewood as well. But there is that is, I think, answering some of that controversy specific to Madagascar.
Sure, absolutely. And I think we're going to still see some, for us to be able to go and say we're done with Madagascar altogether is kind of just a little bit silly too. And I just wanted to cover that side of this base before we get into what it does for the guitar world. And that is, now that we're in that world, it has a lot of those properties. In fact, for me, it has been the most affordable option to get you a close to Brazilian type of tone. The one you're holding right now is actually my personal guitar. I got this one in August, and it had a lot of the characteristics I was looking for in a Rosewood guitar. For me personally, I found that most Indian Rosewood guitars are a little bit mushy on the low to low mid area and tend to not have as much definition. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't any of that out there, but by far a majority for myself, for the tone I was looking for, tended to fall in that world where, which I hadn't played a lot of Brazilian Rosewood until later in my playing career. It became, something that I was like, ooh, these guitars all have a little bit tighter, more responsive low end. And then when I got to experience some of these guitars with Madagascar Rosewood, that's what I seem to experience one more time.
And this is a Bourgeois guitar. When we actually went up to tour the Bourgeois workshop, they had this one there, and you played it. I think that's where you really said, "Ooh, there's something to this." It was before Eastman had released their Madagascar series, so it was one of your early chances to play a Madagascar Rosewood and just sit down with it, and you fell in love with it.
Yes. So let's start by talking about that guitar right there. I'm very familiar with that guitar. Like I said, I've got it. I've had it now for about 6 months or so, 5 months, and I've played it almost exclusively since then. It's a unique set of Madagascar Rosewood. If you look at the sides and back of this, is a very light color and very different from most of the Madagascar that I had seen, but tonally fit in that property. So this one is a Tony Rice / Clarence White style guitar, and has all those appointments. It's their large Soundhole D or Dreadnought. Does have an 1 3/4 nut width. Has the old a vintage Waverly tuners, bound fretboard with the extended fretboard in large Soundhole, a Adirondack spruce top that has been torrefied or thermo-cured. Now this one does differ from some of the Rice models in that it doesn't have a drop-in saddle, but everything else kind of puts you towards that vintage Tony Rice style guitar. So what I like about this guitar, and again falls into this Madagascar sound, is that there. It is a extremely, like, I hear every frequency all throughout that note. It's multiple octaves, way less of the roary overtones, and that's what most people, when they kind of get into Rosewood guitars, especially miking them live on stage, they tend to be a little bit beefy and boomy, and something that I've always strived to stay away from. That's the reason why most of my guitars have always been mahogany.
Which it seems like the type of person that really gravitates towards that deeper tone is more of a rhythm guitar player that doesn't do a lot of lead, but they just want that really fill the entire stage with bass frequencies. And I think a lot of lead players kind of lean away from the Rosewood because of that. They'll go to a mahogany, where this is kind of giving that mahogany clarity to those low notes, but more low to it.
Yeah, when we do that like low passage on Crossing the Big Sandy, it's not roary at all. It's just got this, it's got the low end, and it's something I miss out of mahogany guitars. I've played mostly mahogany guitars throughout my career. I've had one Rosewood guitar until this one, and I always wanted that low end, but I needed it to be tight. I needed it to be focused. I needed it to be there. So that's what I like about this guitar. And like you said, the story on this guitar was it was literally sitting around in the Bourgeois workshop. We pulled it out to shoot some video and content, and the more I played it, the more I fell in love with it. And we came home, and then I just told him I gotta have that guitar. So that's how this guitar came to be.
Tell us about this one.
So this guitar right here is a Atkin D37 pre-war. Now, again, a lot of commonalities with that guitar in that it has an aged tone or thermo-cured Adirondack spruce top, Madagascar Rosewood sides and back, does have the Ivoroid binding. This particular model that we ordered does have an 1 3/4, and it is a very V-shaped neck. Now, I didn't talk about the neck shape of the Bourgeois at all. It's more of a modern, it is definitely of the Bourgeois style. It has slight V to it, but it's more rounded. But this one is definitely a vintage V-shaped neck. It doesn't bulk up in the upper section like a true 30s era guitar would do, but it does have that same profile all the way through it. Now he does do a very, very thin nitro cellulose finish on these guitars, and then he ages them. This is his aged finish, and it has kind of a crackle finish checking that automatically happens with it. And there's an argument for that. If some people love the look of it, there's that, but there's also doing that kind of loosens up that finish a little bit more. So even though it's thinner to start with, it loosens it up because it's got fracture points in order to expand and contract with the vibration of the guitar. Now you hear this one has, again, a lot more low end than that guitar has, and that's again part of Dana's sound. He wants to go after more of a pre-war Martin sound on this. It's surprising. This has so much low end and vibrates so big, and it's a big sounding guitar. Yet again, we keep hearing that same. Now, definitely's got way more of that roar than that one has, but it's not mushy at all. It is very. There's an attack on the front side of that note that just kind of jumps out there. And that bottom end roundness is kind of translated on this guitar all the way through it. I mean, you hear that top end.
Especially, I really hear when you like strike a few notes at once, like a.
Yeah, I think
they just don't blend together. They really all stand out individually.
So again, more of that big boomy Martin-y kind of sound, but still seems to be more articulate and tight. Again, specs on this: 1 3/4, ebony bridge, bone nut and saddle, that same Adirondack top, and Madagascar sides and back. So.
Like I said, a lot darker color to that, and I don't know if that's the actual pieces of wood or if they do a little bit of staining.
I'm going to say it's the actual. This is, to me, more quintessential the look of most of the Madagascar I've seen. Honestly, I've never seen anything quite like that one in there. And I've told people this before. I fell in love with that guitar. It probably would not have been the set of Madagascar, even though it's gorgeous and that, it would have been, in my mind, I know I picture a little bit different look to it, but I just couldn't pass that guitar up. So let's switch to a couple more guitars and talk about those, all right?
Yeah.
So now we've moved on. A couple new guitars. This one right here is actually kind of special. Got this in as a consignment from one of our guys who's actually ordered a custom Boucher, which is what you're holding right now. That's kind of, how about that for a coincidence?
Coincidence or no?
Well, he's needing a smaller body and bought this one. Really cool guitar. This is part of Martin's Authentic series. This is the 1937 D28 Authentic. This one does have the VTS on it, which is their vintage tone system. Man, I'm trying to remember all these wild acronyms that everybody has for all their different ones. But what that basically means for Martin is, again, a thermo-cured Adirondack spruce top. This is a fantastic guitar. It definitely falls in all the specs of the original 1937. We do have that 1 3/4 V-shaped neck that does profile much bigger as it gets towards the body here. And for some of you, that's going to be a deal breaker. For others of us that are into vintage guitars are going to be like, yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. So again, Waverly tuners on this, the VTS Adirondack spruce top, slot through saddle, so it does look like that. Again, part of Martin's deal with the Authentic series is also to build them all out of hide glue, which is the way they were originally built. And you know, this one again, fantastic sounding guitar. Definitely has more of the Martin roar to it.
It's also been played for a couple more years than the other ones. We're comparing it to, so that low end might have opened up.
But the bottom end, I still find that it still has that initial attack that we keep talking about that just kind of jumps out. It is a little bit mushier, but then, again, compared to what we've all seen from the Martin sound, which is a deeper, you know, thicker low end, I would say a less controlled low end.
More omnipresent.
This definitely has it. Now, a fantastic
Very
guitar.
responsive.
I would definitely own this guitar. I find this to be a very great one if you're looking for a little bit more. You want that kind of attack and control on the front side of it. This is going to do that. But if you need that bigger, boomier, low end, this is, I think that's what this guitar is all about. So again, specs on this: 1.75" nut width, that vintage V neck, VTS or torrefied top, and a Madagascar sides and back. All of these, by the way, are going to be a standard dreadnought scale at 25.5 inches, and it's a great sounding guitar.
It is.
So, what are you holding, Jer?
This is a Boucher.
Are we switching?
Yeah, you're the one demoing all these because I don't play guitar.
All right.
That.
Well, thank you, Vanna.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Oh, that's a
one got
discounted one.
discounted.
That is also big bass end to this one.
Again, now Boucher, for a lot of you are not familiar with Boucher guitars. Boucher is out of Canada, up in the Quebec region, builds some great stuff, and has kind of created their own voicing. It is kind of a more modern voicing. For me, leans more in towards that Collings type of tone, with a lot more overtones and kind of stuff happening, less of the dry type of sound and more of a kind of omnipresent done. Now this is the BG-152-GM. Excuse me. Boucher does a lot of their builds in packs. So you get a standard BG-152, which would be a Madagascar sides and back, Adirondack spruce top, and then they kind of add packs to it. In this case, they did a gold pack. The gold pack adds a thermo-cured Adirondack spruce top and the gold hardware. They also then will add the master pack, which now brings you to a master grade Adirondack top that has been torrefied or thermo-cured. And then you do the Koa bindings and the abalone rosette with the B in the 12th fret. Inlays are really cool. The Bluegrass series has a slightly larger sound hole than their Studio Goose and is voiced for medium strings, a little bit more power, a little bit more punch. I also learned recently inlays are a little bit different on the Bluegrass series. The Studio Goose has the big dots, little dots for this more vintage-like on those.
And so Madagascar on this one, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think comparison-wise on this one? It seems like...
Compared to the ones that we had before, I'm not hearing as much of that initial attack, but in comparison to the guitars from Boucher that we have had before, and that's hard for you guys to relate to because, you know, we get to play with these all the time, he tends to have a little bit more of that kind of low-end rumble in the Bluegrass series.
On the low end than this one was, but maybe missing some of the overall beats that the Martin had.
I would agree with that. It's got a low mids that is stronger, but not quite as much of that attack that we've been seeing in most of these other guitars that we've played so far. Still a fantastic sounding guitar. I think I've come to a conclusion I just like them all. So
that's what this video is for.
That's not bad.
Are we seeing a commonality between all these Madagascar? What are the stats on this one? The specs on the nut width and
again on this, the Bluegrass Goose have now all been updated to an 1.75" nut width. Again, the 25.5 inch scale. This one does have the enlarged sound hole, slightly enlarged sound hole, and a voicing setup for medium strings. It does have an ebony bridge, ebony fretboard. Madagascar Rosewood on the back and sides, a master grade Adirondack top on the top, and with the Koa wood bindings and herringbone, it just has all the kind of bells and whistles. Now this one does have the gold tuners to go along with it, so fantastic guitar for more of a modern feel. Now profile of the neck, definitely this is our easiest and most modern shape in here. This doesn't really have a V to it at all. It's a standard C with a very medium to low profile neck in here. So again, if you're wanting more of that vintage type of feel and sound, this is a really good option to get you a modern playing feeling guitar. So that's the BG-152-GM. Is this our last one?
This is our last one right now.
All right, we'll switch it out.
One.
So this is the thing that kind of got all this communication started in the last few years for us, which is the new E20D-MR-TC. Those of you guys who are familiar with Eastman know that Eastman has been building the E20D for a long time. Super successful. Indian rosewood, normally Adirondack spruce top. Very affordable guitar, and just a very, great guitar to go with all the way around. Now again, on specs with this, we're doing 1 3/4 with a bone nut and saddle, ebony as well on the fretboard and bridge. Standard here. Now this one, we didn't talk about the X-brace placement on all of these other guitars, so let's cover that real quick. The Bourgeois has a forward shifted X-brace. It is double scalloped, so there is that. The Martin also fell in a forward shifted X-brace that is double scalloped, as well as the Atkin D37 pre-war. The Boucher, I believe, is a forward shifted brace too. This one is going to be our guitar that is not. And obviously, by the way, the Martin has to be. That's pre-war style forward shifted brace. Everything the same. This one will be moved back to a standard bracing placement. One more thing to discuss on these guitars, besides their bracing differences, is how their necks are
attached to the guitar.
Connected, absolutely.
The neck bone's attached to the body bone.
So far, out of all these 5 guitars that we've had, we have 2 of them that are a standard dovetail. The Eastman being one, obviously the Martin being the other. The Bourgeois will have Dana's patented neck joint system. And then I know Atkin also uses a bolt-on neck that's kind of in between the Collings and the Bourgeois one, and then Boucher also does a bolt-on. I'm not exactly positive how they do that.
Most modern guitar builders have kind of gone towards that for. We've talked about this in other videos. Maintenance, yeah.
Purely maintenance.
Every guitar is going to need a neck reset at some point in time. A bolt-on system is much easier to do that maintenance with.
Faster and hopefully less expensive, depending on who your luthier is.
But for tradition, obviously, Martin sticking with something that's the one that brought you at the dance, I think, is the term.
Not just that, but we also did a video ourselves. We had guitars in of the same exact build, one done in a bolt-on neck and the other one done in a dovetail. Our consensus was we prefer.
You can hear a difference, and in the traditional model, we were very excited and happy that Eastman stuck with the dovetail joint in their traditional series.
Yeah, I think it gave it much more credibility in that traditional world. If that's what you're looking for, makes more sense. So anyway, this one is definitely a torrefied Adirondack spruce top.
So all the same specs as the E20.
Madagascar Rosewood. Now here's what's cool about the Madagascar Rosewood. There has been a joint venture between Bourgeois and Eastman that was announced about 1.5 years ago. And part of the coolest thing that came out of this was this guitar, due to the fact that now with a much bigger buying power and numbers being built, we talked to Dana, they're hoping for 700 guitars this year?
400.
400 guitars, way off. So they haven't even hit 500 guitars a year. So to buy and get an affordable lot of Madagascar Rosewood was going to be really hard, knowing that that's a small percentage of what they build, small numbers. So with Eastman putting out a lot bigger numbers, they were able to get a much bigger supply. Again, bulk, as we always know, makes prices go down, and they were able to get a large supply of Madagascar Rosewood that was shared between both Bourgeois and Eastman, and then that allowed this model to come out, and there's going to be some other really cool things that come out of that purchase as well in the future, and that is a E20 that falls under $2,500 with all those features. Again, a great sounding guitar. Now, not as much low end as any of the other ones we had, but it's also, again, brand new. We just opened the box of this one yesterday. Definitely So this comes back to that thing that we keep talking about, that initial attack. This definitely has it.
I think the bass is still lacking on this a little bit. It's going to probably come with a little bit of time, but it's not being overpowered right now. It's not really roary sounding.
And again, we've seen this guitar done in an Indian Rosewood guitar. Definitely has more of that boomy roar that naturally comes out of it. So in comparison to the build style of other Eastman E20s that we've seen, I'm again seeing that same it's just there. It just has that automatically put. Again, I'm going to run the specs on this guitar one more time. 1 3/4, 25.5-inch scale. This one is going to be the back shifted X brace, but it is fully scalloped and hand voiced. Bone nut and saddle on an ebony bridge, ebony fretboard. Just, you know, it's a comfortable, easy play. Now this one, again, has a standard modern C medium profile neck shape. Open gear tuners. Just a comfortable overall guitar to play.
Madagascar Rosewood, the great shootout. I don't know, we'll have 5 different manufacturers have Madagascar Rosewood in at the same time again, so I'm glad we were able to make this video. I can't wait to read the comments because I know there's going to be some great ones, but mostly about talking and our weight and our age. But the ones that talk about the actual tone of the guitars, I can't wait to see if people saw an underlying commonality, if they saw one that they loved a lot more than the other ones, or if they thought it was a wash. But your opinions, John, you played them
Jeremy,
all back to back.
I'm going to give you my opinions because we all know that's what everybody wants to hear. My opinion on this. Here's the deal. All 5 of these guitars had their commonalities of what their brands do best. But I thought that there was an underlying theme that continued to exist all the way through it, which was a more... And it's slight. This is a very light difference. This is not like, oh my God, I will never survive in a Rosewood guitar unless it's Madagascar or Brazilian. To me, it was just that it was a little more focused and attack. They just had more attack on the front end of the note, especially on the low end. To me, that was the commonality of every single one of these.
And you thought it was present throughout the different range?
I really did. The only one I felt it was less present on was the Boucher, actually, that you're holding there, only because it has such pronounced mid-range that I don't think that kind of stood out as much in that particular guitar. But for every one of them that I've compared their normal guitars to this variation,
Indian versus
yeah, that's what I mean. Yes, their normal Indian variant of every one of these guitars. Every single one of them come out to me as a tighter, more focused, and a quicker attack on the lows, and even in the mids and highs to a degree as well. So.
And that's one of the cool things about owning a guitar shop is we get the opportunity that a lot of people wouldn't have to have all these different brands in the shop at once. We can compare them. And then you guys at home get a chance to kind of watch this vicariously through our YouTube channel. So thank you guys for subscribing to this. Make sure you should share it if you enjoyed it. Share it with anybody else that might also be into this sort of thing. We love doing these videos and we appreciate your support. I think if you like this video, you're really going to like the. We did one where we first got in the
new Eastmans,
the Eastman MRs and the Touchstones, and then we compared it against the standard E20.
Correct.
So we did those three guitars to see how much difference there was between their new Touchstone series and then the Madagascar. I think you'll really like that video, and there's a link to that right here. And I can't wait till we do another one of these shootouts. They're one of the coolest things about this channel.